Welcome to today's Explainer. We're taking a culturally ubiquitous obsession and, well, totally demystifying it. We see it in classic art, we see it at the gym, and let's be honest, we see it all over our feeds. But today, we're stripping away all the hype. We're going to look at the human posterior strictly through the lens of science, evolution, and anatomy.
Now, to keep things perfectly safe for work, so we don't trip any of your workplace internet filters, we're going to use the ultimate visual metaphor, the peach. You see this emoji absolutely everywhere, right? It's perfectly safe, but it carries this massive cultural significance. It accurately mimics the rounded symmetry and contours of the human glutes, acting as a handy stand-in for a body part that has literally commanded human attention for millennia. Okay, let's dive into this. Because, look, this isn't just some modern internet phenomenon. The appeal of this exact shape goes back millions of years. It's deeply, deeply embedded in our ancient biology. Our brains are essentially running this prehistoric software that equates certain geometric contours with survival, vitality, and human connection. It really begs the question, why is our species so uniquely fixated on this one specific anatomical feature?
To answer that, here's our anatomical lesson plan for today. We'll be mapping our journey with 1. The geometry of peaches, 2. The cultural meaning of size, 3. The evolution of attraction, 4. The psychology of the cleft, and finally, 5. The anatomy of the gluteal smile. Kicking things off with Section 1, the geometry of peaches. So, just like different varieties of fruit, human gluteal morphology naturally falls into 5 primary shapes. We've got the round or O shape, which is perfectly even and circular. Next is the heart or A shape. That one's fuller in the lower portion with wider hips. Then there's the square or H shape, characterized by straighter sides and a bit less curve. The V shape is fuller at the top and narrower toward the bottom. And finally, the flat or I shape, which features minimal projection. Now, while every single one of these shapes is completely natural, they do interact with our visual perception in very different ways. And this brilliantly illustrates something key. Notice how the heart, or A shape, is so often culturally favored, frequently labeled as hot. But why is that? Well, it's because of the cleft. The cleft visually anchors the shape, really accentuating the symmetry and the depth. In psychology, we know our brains are incredibly drawn to symmetry and clear geometric definitions in human anatomy. We basically instantly associate those things with health and beauty.
Moving right along to Section 2, the cultural meaning of size.
Because size actually carries heavy symbolic meaning for us. If we contrast the two ends of the spectrum, larger, fuller shapes are culturally viewed as powerful and robust. They signal lower body strength and positive metabolic health, particularly fat storage patterns that favor the lower body. Conversely, smaller shapes are often described as cute, adorable, and delicate. Interestingly, though, small shapes are sometimes incorrectly perceived as weaker, despite the fact that they're incredibly common in high-level endurance athletes and gymnasts.
Which brings us to Section 3, the evolution of gluteal attraction.
Looking at this from an evolutionary standpoint, physical attraction is heavily rooted in our subconscious cues for survival. First off, estrogen causes fat to store around the hips and buttocks. So, to our ancient male ancestors, a rounded backside historically signaled high estrogen levels, youth, and adequate fat stores for sustaining a pregnancy. Second, and this is absolutely crucial, is bipedalism. When humans evolved to walk upright, our gluteus maximus muscle expanded significantly. Because we started mating face-to-face or from behind rather than on all fours, the buttocks became a primary eye-level visual focal point for human sexual attraction. And that leads us to a seriously fascinating concept, the spine curve theory. So the wild point here, and this is a great dinner party fact by the way, is that human attraction isn't actually about the muscle or the fat itself. It's all about the biomechanics of the lower back. Evolutionary psychology studies show that a very specific spinal wedging was required for pregnant women to shift their weight over their hips. This was a game changer because it allowed them to remain mobile and forage for food without causing catastrophic damage to their spine. 45.5 degrees. Yep, research shows that this is the exact, scientifically proven angle of curvature from the lower back to the buttocks that humans are just deeply, subconsciously attracted to. It is quite literally primal math, hardwired into the human brain to ensure the survival and mobility of our ancestors. Crazy, right?
All right, Section 4, the psychology of the cleft.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how the intergluteal cleft, represented beautifully by the deep crease on our peach here, acts as this incredibly powerful visual frame. It's not just a physical division, it visually highlights the roundness and depth of the gluteal muscles. Subconsciously, when we see this clear geometric definition, our brain's reward pathways just light up, instantly linking that symmetry to peak physical health.
But beyond just geometry, we've got something called the taboo factor. You see, because the cleft is usually hidden by clothing in modern society, seeing it actually triggers a very specific psychological response. It's heavily linked to anticipation and this whole concept of the forbidden. When we view parts of the body that are normally kept private, the brain releases dopamine. It's this chemical reward that heightens our attention and arousal, driving a really strong feeling of exclusive intimacy.
And objectively speaking about our anatomical realities here, this area isn't just visually stimulating, it is literally packed neurologically. The anus and the surrounding perianal skin contain a massive concentration of sensitive nerve endings, making it a highly reactive erogenous zone. Engaging with a highly private and taboo part of the body requires immense trust, which psychologically heightens both arousal and vulnerability. Plus, modern media and pornography have heavily normalized a focus on this region, which conditions the brain's reward centers to closely associate these visual cues with high sexual arousal. So it's really a perfect storm of ancient biology and modern media conditioning our reward centers.
Finally, let's jump into Section 5, Anatomy of the Gluteal Smile. Let's move to and actually see how this physical architecture builds step by step. Anatomically known as the gluteal sulcus, this so-called smile is really just the result of 4 overlapping physical factors. Step 1. Deep connective tissue anchors the skin firmly to the underlying pelvic bone. Step 2. Fat naturally accumulates right above this attachment, creating a rounded overhang. Step 3. A well-developed gluteus maximus muscle pushes that skin and fat outward, sharply defining the line. And finally, Step 4. Physical factors like arching the back, tilting the pelvis, or doing heavy squats lift the glutes and deepen that crease, making the smile incredibly prominent.
So as we look at our trusty visual metaphor one last time, it brings us right back to our original question. What seems like a fleeting internet obsession is actually millions of years of evolutionary engineering. From the 45.5-degree spinal curve that literally saved early humans to the dopamine-releasing symmetry of the cleft, our preferences written right into our DNA. So, does understanding all this primal, evolutionary math behind the shape change how you view modern internet culture? It just goes to show, doesn't it? Sometimes our most modern obsessions are really just our ancient instincts saying hello.